Hello, welcome back to the Oberheim OB-Xa tutorial series. Today we're dealing with three sections, all this stuff along the bottom. They're relatively small topics in their own right, so we can clump them into one session. And in a dramatic break with tradition, we'll have a square wave instead. I just can't stand the prospect of a saw wave today. Let's do the arpeggiator first. So what this is going to do is it's going to break chords down into individual notes. We need to turn it on, and then I'll play a simple C major. So I played all three notes simultaneously, but it plays them sequentially. Now I happened to play the notes in the right order that time, but this time I'll press the C first and then the E and then the G. And the reason for that behaviour is because of the as played option. That determines how the OBX breaks that chord up into its individual notes. This is our range of choices, so up and down are pretty self-explanatory. I'll jump straight to up, down, 1. What this one basically does is plays the notes of the chord, but when it comes back down, it doesn't play the extreme notes twice. So if I play C, E, G, it cycles around that chord, but it never plays the extremities repeated, as opposed to up, down, 2, which does. Now, that gets really confusing when you start playing notes that are a natural octave apart from each other over more than one octave. So let's have a look at this. If I switch from 1 octave to 2, firstly, I'm going to leave it in include mode and I'm going to play C, E, G. So you can hear it plays all 6 notes going up and then reboots itself and plays all 6 notes coming down. So we get C, E, G over 2 octaves. The difficulty comes when the notes on the keyboard that I press include an octave bounce. Now I'm going to play C2, E2, G2 and then a C3 and hear what kind of chaos we get. So the problem is, and the reason why it becomes very quickly difficult to actually make out what an arpeggiator is doing, is it plays the sequence and then it shifts all of those notes up an octave, plays the sequence again, but because the notes that you've played are actually an octave span apart, that middle note, the C3, is the first note of the transposed sequence, and that's why it gets played twice as part of the sequence. Let's not worry too much about it. I mean, it's an idiosyncrasy of arpeggiators that you need to decide which of these two structures you're going to use, but you do get some kind of, freaky results out of it. It's very kind of unexpected behaviour when you play. I'm playing 2 Cs at the moment on their own, and you get this kind of weird behaviour. You can see that I can make it go faster with rate, that's pretty obvious. And random. Literally every single time it repeats the sequence, it chooses new notes. Other than that, pretty straightforward, nice, cute little arpeggiator. No bells or whistles, just the absolute bare functionality. Completely fine with that. Portamento has a couple of skeletons in its closet. Firstly, let's talk about it in its kind of simple mode. Portamento is the slide from one note to another. Now, you've not heard, if I play a C and then an upper C, there's no slide between them. There's no off button as such, but when time is set to 0, that's effectively an off button. If I introduce a period of time over which that slide is going to take place, and I'll just play a new note on the keyboard somewhere else, I'll play a C4. Now what just happened there is the OB-Xa remembered the last note that had been played. And so, did you hear that I just played a G3 then? So why didn't it slide down from C4 to G3? It's because it's got 8 voices, and each one of those voices has its own little memory bank. Now, you might not want to obsess yourself with this too much and just enjoy Portamento as a thing. But if you actually want to understand what's going on, the only way to do it, to deconstruct it, is let's play a scale from C2 to C3. I'll play every note of a C major scale. And then I'm going to let each note rest at that point. You hear how unusual or different each one of those slides were. That's because each one of those notes that I played was coming from a different place, totally randomly determined by the last 8 notes that I happened to play on this synthesizer. But here's the kicker. Those notes are all now in memory. So if I play that scale again, you get no portamento. Each one of the 8 voices knows that that note was the last note it played. And so if you come back round and play that note again, it's got nowhere to go. Now if I play a D, that's the next note that was in its internal memory bank. And so you can kind of trick it into abandoning its portamento. And you can even do it kind of half and half. If I play C, D, E, F, and now 4 random keys, portamento, portamento, and then my 4th one, if the next note I play is C2, we're not going to get any portamento, because that's still the note in that voice's memory slot. There's my D, there's my E, there's my F, and the other 4 notes are the random ones that I just played, you know, anywhere on the keyboard. So just something to bear in mind, that results may be different from those that you may have expected. But once you get into the hang of it, or consciously choose to abandon the concept entirely and just kind of let it do its own thing, what you do end up with is some of them sliding up, some of them sliding down, and all sorts of glorious chaos in between. If we engage quantize, it basically quantizes this in semitones, in terms of semitones, the slide, and this is called glissando rather than portamento. And the time period specifies how long it spends on each one of those steps. Kind of cute. At very small times, it's almost the same as portamento. Turn that off. And then finally, we're dealing with the vibrato section. Now, this is very similar to the modulation options OSC1 frequency and OSC2 frequency that we dealt with in the modulation bank. Essentially the same feature, because vibrato is the periodic modulation of pitch, as we discussed in that video. But let's cover it in its own right. So the modulation bank is not on. This is the vibrato engine that's going to take care of this now. Introduce some depth. There's my rate, just like we had the rate knob for the LFO modulation, got our own dedicated rate for the vibrato effect. So we've got dedicated oscillators just for this job. I don't really know why they've repeated it over here, frankly. It's like a couple of wasted slots, really. But other than that, it's just a very straightforward vibrato engine that we, as I say, we dealt with earlier. And that's it for this video, short and sweet. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do consider hitting the like button. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithms and all that nonsense. Hope to see you for the next video. Thanks a lot for watching.